Welcome to Citizen Impact. Citizen Impact is a community project of the Miami Valley Full Employment Council. I'm your host, Logan Martinez. We have a great show for you tonight, very important show, on the 65th anniversary of the International Human Rights Declaration. Before we get into that, just a little update on things. The Congress and the President have not dealt with the fact that almost 3 million unemployed workers are going to lose extended unemployment benefits. About 1.3 million or 1,300,000, about 40,000 here in Ohio are going to lose it on the 28th of December here. It's the 7th year of the recession, and we still have 24.4 million unemployed and underemployed. And the Full Employment Council has been promoting the John Conyers jobs bill. It would create 4 to 5 million good paying jobs, improving our communities, improving our society, and would make a huge dent in the unemployment problem. They've been making good progress with the bill. They've got 53 co-sponsors in the House of Representatives, and we're looking to get it endorsed and put into the Senate. But it is the first major jobs bill that's been put out there. But we want to fight for a safety net for folks, and we intend not to go down. We started out as the Full Unemployment Council 25 years ago fighting for extended unemployment benefits then. And the people that are losing this, we're in the same boat, everybody. These people, when they lose their benefits, they're going to lose their homes. They're going to go through all kinds of additional turmoil, and it's affecting your neighbor and your family members. And we need the community, and we need everybody in this society to stand up and start fighting back, because the ship is sinking fast, and the people in Washington are pouring water in the boat and not trying to save us. Like I said, this is the 65th anniversary of International Human Rights Declaration that was passed by the United Nations back in 1948. And at that point, it was a major breakthrough to get the countries of the world to agree to have a basic framework of principles of what a human is entitled to. At that point, there were still countries in the Middle East and in Africa that had slavery. Saudi Arabia did not do away with slavery until 1959. 100 years after the United States Civil War, they still had slavery in Saudi Arabia. And it was the last country to do away with it. Women didn't have rights. Unions were not looked upon, and all kinds of foul things happened to people all over the world. And in fact, as things stand now, we're going backwards. People's rights are being eroded all over the world, and American rights are being eroded. We have a great panel with us tonight, and we have some guests in the audience. They're going to be talking about different aspects of human rights. But we'd like to thank everybody showing up here tonight. It's a very cold night in Dayton, but we're very proud to be able to put this together and celebrate and move the ball forward on human rights here in Dayton and around the country and around the world. The guest we have tonight, Professor Randall from the retired University of Dayton now.
Yes.
But you're working on schools and the prison pipeline.
Yes.
It's a freeway almost, isn't it? Or a superhighway.
Our jet to the moon.
We have more people in prison than any other country on the planet. And you'll be talking about that here in a moment. We are very proud to have Charles Norton with the AFL-CIO's, the new executive director. You were with the building trades for a long time, and
Right.
now you're the executive secretary here. And we've been trying to work with unions for many years, and worked in solidarity on a number of different struggles. And we're really glad that you're here, and looking forward to working with the unions in 2014.
Good.
We have Mary Sue
Gmeiner.
Gmeiner, sorry, I apologize, with the Greater Dayton Move to Amend, which is fighting for electoral reform of Citizens United.
Fighting against corporate personhood, against money equal to speech. So it's a broad coalition. It's a multiracial democracy coalition to change the conversation on politics in this country.
Terrific. I know you've been active, a lot of groups in Ohio working on it, I know.
Yes.
And Steve Fryburg with No Drones and Veterans for Peace, talking about how our money is being wasted and how lives are being wasted.
Thank you.
So Steve, thanks for being here. And we have a little bit of an audience here tonight, and we will get to them in a little bit to talk about, there are a lot of human rights and a lot of aspects to it, and we're only going to be able to cover a little bit of it today, but we want to get going on it, and everybody's going to talk about different aspects, and then we're going to have a general dialogue about it. And Dr. Randall?
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm a professor emeritus at the University of Dayton, as you indicated, but I'm also with an organization called Racial Justice Now. And what we focus on is eliminating institutional and systemic discrimination in American society. And one of the big areas we believe is mass incarceration, as you indicated. The United States represents only 5% of the world population, but we represent 25% of the world prisoners. And we have more people in prison than all the countries in the world, except for, than any other country in the world. In mass incarceration, we think that slavery. There's a good film called Slavery by Another Name, a good book called Slavery by Another Name, and mass incarceration is the only legal form of slavery in the United States. If you look at the U.S. Constitution, the Constitution eliminated slavery except in the face of crime and convictions, and so imprisonment. And so what we find now is with this privatization of prisons, where people are now making money off of how many bodies that they can put into prison. And also, less talked about is the prison workers. A lot of the things that people make, there are a lot of hiring out of prisoners to do jobs at wages that are like way below minimum wage. And so they can do that because under the Constitution and within our society, that might be considered slavery, except for the fact they are prisoners. One of the big issues is how do we get these prisoners, and what we're working on is the school-to-prison pipeline, because there's a direct pipeline from school to prisons. And this is a human rights issue, as you pointed out. It's maybe one of the most significant human rights issues, because we, through a prison system, is taking away people's education and taking away people's ability to earn a livelihood. And so it's an important human right issue. How do we get there? Give you an example of some statistics. What happens in the school-to-prison pipeline is that people are suspended and excluded from school. And then once they are suspended and excluded from school, they fall behind in their education. And once they fall behind in their education, they don't want to go back. And once they don't go back, they are out on the streets and they're getting in trouble or being picked up for other things. So the one thing you need to do is to stop suspensions, stop school suspensions. In the United States, 1 out of 4 African Americans will be suspended secondary, and compared to 1 out of 7 white students. Not one, excuse me, I said that wrong. 24% of African Americans will be suspended compared to 7% of white students. In Dayton, 30% of African Americans will be suspended compared to 13% of white students. This suspension comes from what we call zero tolerance, and started about 10 years ago, saying it started out of all of the trauma from mass shootings. And if it had stopped at violence, actual violence, we wouldn't have a problem. Over the 6,000 suspension that occurred in Dayton in 2010, only 21 was due to the use of a gun. So most of the suspension is for non-violent behavior. Over 4,000 was for disobedient and disruptive. So students' education are being disrupted because people don't like the way they're talking, chewing gum, being mouthing. So getting rid of zero tolerance law, which Ohio has, would be a big step. The other issue is we're now using law enforcement to do discipline in schools. They're called school resource officers, and if you ask superintendents, it's always funny to me because they want to deny the use of law enforcement. They want to say, oh, we don't have police in our school. I said, well, if a person is trained to be a law enforcer or officer and has arrest authority and carries around a handcuffs, you can call them whatever you want, but they're law enforcement officers. The use of law enforcement officers means that law enforcement officers have a different sort of training, and so they begin to look at ordinary disciplinary problems as safety issues, as enforcement issues.
Criminal behavior.
Criminal behavior. And then high-stake testing contributes to it. So when you have schools like Dayton and other schools that are in trouble in the high-stake testing where you have the 3rd grade guarantee, what ends up happening is you can find a correlation between suspension and testing. That when you get close to suspension time, testing time, suspension goes up. There's a lack of accountability. So like for instance, the school report card doesn't even mention this problem with school suspensions, and that would be a way to make it accountable, to say what percentage of your students are being suspended. And so finally, the point that I want to make is that this is a racial issue because of the disparity that it goes on. And the example that I like to use is Oakwood. Oakwood doesn't have a whole lot of black students, and Oakwood doesn't have a whole lot of suspensions either. Their suspension rate is like the lowest one of the lowest in the state, 0.2. But the black students are 11.5 times more likely to be suspended in Oakwood than the white students, even though the suspension rate is not high. So the problem we see, it's both getting rid of suspension for restorative justice type of counseling, for peer mediation type of disciplinary actions, and assuring that there is a good educational opportunity for all students. Students need to be disciplined, yes, but they need to be educated, and we think that that you can do them both without suspending students.
Okay, well, thank you very much. One of the things that I noticed time in Dayton that they didn't have very. They waited until the spring before they dealt with people that were skipping a lot or had been suspended a lot. So they didn't really crack down in Dayton, and I don't know what the policy is now, on people skipping. So by the time they really cracked down on people, they were already so far behind that they became, dropouts because they had gotten away with it for so long, and the choices were very minimum. Now we're going to move on to this. One of the rights recognized under the UN Declaration of Human Rights is the right to belong to a union. That unions have existed for several hundred years. I was reading a book that the first union were weavers in the northwest corner when they were first started manufacturing, and the first strike that ever took place was weavers that went on strike back in the 1600s. And so the right for people at work has been a struggle, and the UN recognized it, that's something that people, is part of your human right. So Chuck could tell you a little bit about the unions here in Dayton.
Certainly, Logan. I too want to thank you for having me on the show. All these are very important subjects and situations that we have to take care of. But unions have long been a part of our nation's history, fighting for better pay, safer working conditions, health care and pension benefits, education, and civic participation. And right here we have a good union history right here in the Miami Valley. Of course, we've lost some membership due to the closing of our GM plants and some of our other manufacturing, but we still have a strong union movement here in Dayton, Ohio. But it's people, working people, union and non-union, need to realize the importance of unions and what will happen if they're no longer around. There's studies after studies that show that as union membership decreases, union middle class wages decrease. And as union membership decreases, the income inequality increases. And that's happening right now. You can watch the news any night and you'll see that. And people take for granted all the different policies and protections that were won through struggle and fighting by the unions and other organizations when we all work together. Just some of those weekends without work, lunch and breaks at work, 8-hour work day, overtime pay, 40-hour work week, workers' compensation protections, safety standards and regulations, race, age, and gender discrimination protection, collective bargaining, pensions and medical insurance, and job training. That's just a few of the protections that we've won over the hard struggle of the years and years. And these items and many more are at stake right now. If the public does not stop and look at this and start supporting their organized labor, their labor unions in their areas, these things can go away as quickly. They'll go away a lot faster than they were ever won. And they have to quit listening to the anti-union talkers on TV and radio and look at the facts. I mean, unions, they help workers, they help business owners. One thing I want to make clear right now is union people are not against businesses. We support businesses. We want our business owners and employers to be productive, to have a good business and be successful, because as long as they're successful and paying decent wages and health care and pension, we support them 100%. But what happens is we get business owners that want to make more money on the back of the workers, and so they start stripping them of their pension benefits or their medical insurance and wanting them to work Saturdays and Sundays with no extra pay and everything. So those are the kind of things that the people, the citizens of our area and the country need to look at. I mean, I know a lot of them like to say, well, unions aren't needed anymore, that there's laws that protect workers. Well, there are laws, some laws that do protect the workers. But the problem with those laws, they have got to be enforced, and they're not. We have elected officials that ignore the laws, and it's criminal, I think, but they they don't agree with the law, so they ignore it. And so those laws aren't always working for the employees. And a lot of people don't know another thing's at risk is unions run the largest career training programs other than the military in this country. And with all the different apprenticeship programs and everything, people can go to work, earn while they learn, and they'll go to school and work at the same time. But we run the second largest training career training in our country, next to the military. So, and that would all be lost if unions go away. So, unions play a vital role in our economy and our well-being for all of our citizens. There's been a thing in the political scene about wage equality with women. Women want equal pay, by all means. And if they're in unions, they have equal pay. There's everybody makes the same. So, that's not even an issue there. And so, I just want to get across to the people in Dayton and the Miami Valley and around the whole country that, stop listening to all the bad things that people say about unions and the people that say that we don't no longer need unions. These are just corporate big wheels that want to do away with unions, and that's not the case. Stop and look at the facts. Look at what you have as a worker and what you might not have if we are no longer around. So,
absolutely, and it affects the white collar workers that some of them have been unionized, but we saw that both with NCR and a number of with the runaway shops and stuff, is that they whittled away at everybody, and if you don't have that contract, you get it faster and quicker, the shaft, and so.
Well, one real quick example, and then with the General Motors, the salary people down at Delphi, which I believe 100% they should be made whole on their pensions, but the difference is between the salaried workers and the hourly workers that were in the union is the union had a legal binding contract, and that's what protected them with their pension. The salary people didn't. So there's a difference right there that people need to look at. So.
Sure, right, and that's why a contract's absolutely critical. So we touched on those two aspects of human rights, but we're going to talk about health care for a second. We have an audience, Bill Davis with the SPAN Ohio, to talk about health care. We've done a number of shows before but it's an ongoing issue.
Hi, Logan. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me. Again, he said, my name is Bill Davis, and I'm with the Single Payer Action Network Ohio. And our mission, we're a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization, and our mission is to educate the public and build grassroots support for HR 676, or a single payer, improved Medicare for all. And there's another bill that's been introduced by Bernie Sanders in the Senate today. I forget what the number of it is, but it's a little different, a little more complex, but it'll be interesting to see what Congress does with those bills. But I'm active in this area. My region consists of Preble, Greene, Montgomery, Miami, Darke, Champaign, and Shelby counties, and Clark. Yeah, Clark I mentioned, and it's pretty hard to cover that kind of territory when you don't have more volunteers, and so that's what we're looking for, to visit our website and people to register. And we're an all-volunteer organization. We don't charge dues. We're just looking for people to register and send a couple dollars our way every now and then when they can, so that we have the ability to advertise a little bit and pay for booths at fairs and that sort of thing. We also have an excellent DVD that was produced by a couple out in Portland, Oregon, called The Healthcare Movie. And we have copies of that DVD available locally. You don't have to mail away and spend $25. It's only $15 if you get it from a local organization. And you don't have to donate and buy one at all. We'll come to your home if you want to, or church or other meeting place where you have a group of people getting together, and we'll show the DVD and have a discussion afterwards.
Well, thank you, Bill. There's 50 million people still don't have health insurance despite the Affordable Health Care Act. It's coming along, but it doesn't solve the whole problem if it was fully in effect.
Right.
And it still maintains a great deal of inequality. The average is that 2 people in Ohio every day die prematurely because they don't have adequate health care. 2 people every day in Ohio.
That's right. Nationwide, it's a very conservative estimate is 45,000 people
Annually.
annually. Yeah, just because they don't have insurance. You know, they won't go to the hospital or to a doctor for care until it's so late that it's hard to save them or to extend their life very long.
Can we put the website back up there on so that people can see it? They get in touch with you through the website, right, Bill?
Right, it's spanohio.org.
Okay. Well, we'll come back to the healthcare issue again here in a minute. So
Okay,
thank
great.
you very much.
Good talking with you.
Okay. Now, and I'm not sure how the International Human Rights deals with the freedom of election and the freedom to vote, but I'm sure that the right to vote and have your vote count is a human right. And we have Mary Sue here to talk about the whole voting apparatus and how it's been warped here by this money.
And not so much voting, but when you invited me on, Logan, and I appreciate the invitation, I thought, all right, so how does the UN Declaration of Human Rights relate to corporate personhood in the United States? And so I look at the Declaration, and right there in the preamble, all members of the human family, and in the dignity and worth of the human person. And then I look at our Constitution, we the people, and it says we the people, and we're talking about people. You read about personhood, natural and born and naturalized persons in the Constitution. And yet what's happened is that that's been turned on its face, and we now have corporations that have these rights of personhood according to the Constitution. So corporate personhood takes away human rights. It usurps those human rights by allowing corporations to have equal protection. So many things. Free speech is one. I want my food labeled. If it's genetically modified, I want to know about it. But corporations say, no, we have a right of free speech, which is also the right not to speak, and so we don't have to label foods as genetically modified. And they rely on this concept of corporate personhood in order to make that happen. A local community wants to keep a big box store out. They're not able to do it anymore, once again, because of corporate personhood. So human rights are being infringed upon. Dr. Randall talked about the school-to-prison pipeline, and certainly the privatization of our prisons by the power of corporations. They've pretty much inserted themselves into our government, from start to finish, from local to national and everywhere in between, so that they are taking away or usurping government responsibilities and trying to take away government authority, in essence, so that they become the government in many places with the privatization. So once again, we've lost sight of the human. We the people have granted authority to the government, and then the government has basically sold it to corporations. So Citizens United is a part of that because now the Supreme Court has said that money equals speech. And that actually goes back to the 70s with the Buckley v. Vallejo decision, and the corporate personhood goes back even to the 1880s. And Supreme Court decisions over the years have just gradually eroded people's rights by giving those same rights to corporations. It's a huge problem. And every issue that you talk about, I'm very concerned about the environment. If you're concerned about workers' rights, if you're concerned about veterans' rights, whatever the issue might be, corporate personhood gets in the way. So I've decided that that's the issue I'm going to work on full time. And the organization that I feel is most in touch with this problem is Move to Amend. So I'm working with Move to Amend. We're trying to pass a constitutional amendment to declare that corporations are not persons and that money does not equal speech. And we're doing this as part of a anti-oppression, multiracial democracy movement, because once we get rid of corporate personhood, and that's not getting rid of corporations, I should add, you know, it's not being against corporations as chartered entities with certain responsibilities and certain, you know, certain rights and responsibilities which are clearly spelled out in a charter. I mean, we're not getting rid of corporations, we're talking about getting rid of corporate personhood and looking at that, you know, and taking away the money equals speech, because money is property, money is not speech. So move to amend, that's
Yeah,
what we're doing.
Well, corporations certainly have had a profound effect on the whole human rights around the world. I get an email from the Coke Kills, the Coca-Cola company. Breaking unions in the third world actually had people assassinated and for being union people. And here they are, a person in America, and in the third world they're shooting people because they want to belong to a union. And that's about as most violation of a human right as you can get. And that brings us to the next point, which, you know, they're dealing with the federal budget here. We've seen the government close down this last fall, and they were, you know, went through a bunch of rigmarole, and now they're making a deal that at least cushions the blow of sequester cuts to some degree, but it still leaves out the extended unemployment benefits. It still has left the food stamp cuts up in the air, and a bunch of programs. We know that this last year, under the round of sequester, 140,000 people lost their housing vouchers as part of that cut. That if they go through with sequester, something like 2 million jobs are on the line. And the Air Force announced just recently that they were going to cut 900 jobs nationally. And how many is that going to mean in Wright Pat? We're concerned about those jobs, but we're concerned about what people do. And now we've been at war for now, very soon, it's been 12 and a half years, it'll be 13 years. We've been at war in the Middle East, and now it's spread into Africa. We're at war in Africa. And we have Steve Fryburg here to talk about the whole notion of how the right for people for peace and human rights in general.
Thanks for having me on the panel tonight. Veterans for Peace, the organization I belong to, is a national, in fact it's becoming an international organization of men and women that have been in the armed forces around the world and here in the United States that have come to the realization that military options are just not the proper options to solve our problems in the world. And I hope that people will check out our website, veteransforpeace.org. Just go online, Google Veterans for Peace, have a real good website. But before I start, I'd like to read a quote that I think people should contemplate. Of all the enemies to public liberty, war is perhaps the most to be dreaded because it comprises and develops the germ of every other. War is the parent of armies. From these proceed debts and taxes, known instruments for bringing the many under the domination of the few. No nation could preserve its freedom in the midst of continual warfare. Now, who do you think would say something like that? Now, we had Eisenhower who mentioned the military-industrial complex and warned us about this. But this was James Madison who said this in 1795, over 200 years ago. And yet we're still doing it today. Global military expenditures in 2012 were over $1.75 trillion. And of that, the United States was 39%, our share of that was 39%. Our budget in 2012 was $685.3 billion. And this is to fight our war on terrorism. We're fighting terrorism with $685.3 billion. But we can't afford schools. We can't afford to keep up our infrastructure. We can't afford jobs. Martin Luther King warned us about this back in his famous speech, Vietnam speech, that if we spend all this kind of money on our military, but sacrifice everything about our country and programs of social uplift, that it'll ruin our country. And that's exactly what's happening now. Talk about a violation of human rights globally and within our own country. I'm a retired police officer and a military veteran, and I believe I got into law enforcement because I believed in justice. But there's no justice when a country's spending this kind of money, and much of this, what we're doing right now, is just violating human rights around the world. Now, you'd asked me to talk about the drone program, which is part of what we're doing with that $685 billion. And the drone program, even some of our own generals like McChrystal and others have even said that the drone program is just becoming a recruiting program for terrorism. So what we're really doing with our current military programs is just perpetuating the war on terrorism, not ending it. And so what we really need to be looking at is taking this kind of obscene expenditures and using it for programs of social uplift, programs of peace, not programs of war, because the only way that we'll ever see peace in the world is through peace, not through war. And as far as jobs, we were talking about this before the show started. There's been several good studies done that show that, you always hear this same mantra has been used over and over again, that, spending money in our military is the big job creator, for our country. And that if we don't spend money in the military, we're going to lose jobs. You hear that especially here in the Miami Valley because of Wright-Patterson. And I'm not going to deny that Wright-Patterson is a big job creator for our area. But just a recent 2010 or 2011 study, 2010 study, showed that if you spend $1 billion in job creation, infusing it into our country's economy, you spend it on the military, it's going to create 11,200 jobs. But if you spend that same amount of money on education, you're going to create 26,700 jobs, over twice as many jobs. And they're going to be good jobs. They're going to be jobs that are going to make it a better world for our children. Military jobs don't make a better world for our children. You spend that same amount on health care, 17,200 jobs. It's compared to 11,200 jobs. Spend it on clean energy, 16,800 jobs. Spend it on tax cuts for the personal consumption, just to make it so people can spend more, 15,100 jobs. So the next time you talk to Turner or Portman or any other of our officials, our government officials, and they tell you, we can't touch that golden budget, the military budget, because of jobs, or it's because it's keeping us safe. Well, one, it's not keeping us any safer, it's making more enemies for us to have to defend against. And the other is it's not creating more jobs. We could spend it better on things that will do better for us here in the United States.
One of the things I like to point out is it's not the GIs that get all this money, it's the corporations.
That's
we
right.
talked about the corporations.
That's right.
Part of this budget deal that they're just doing is there's $80 billion more above the figure for the military, which is over half our budget, that's going to go for Iraq, Afghanistan, and the other wars that we're waging, because they need that extra money. And that money's not going to it's going to the corporations that are supporting that war effort there, because the average GI is very, very poorly paid.
And they're not being supported when they come back home.
Exactly.
Oh yeah.
Excuse me.
Go ahead.
What do you think about the attempt to turn the Miami Valley into the domestic drone center of the United States? And do you think that this secret plant that they're doing out is really going to be a drone manufacturing center?
Well, there's
The old GM?
there's weaponized drones, and then there's drones, other drone technology.
Yeah, domestic drones.
And there are good uses for drone technology. I mean, you've got farming, you've got forest fire detection. There's lots of good technology that can be done with drones. I've seen it. But when you start spying on citizens, when you start using it, to kill people, targeted killing, and you start arming drones, then you're taking them into a realm that they shouldn't be in. And that's, this is what we need to be, our government should be looking at, and they're not looking at it the way they should be. From a law enforcement perspective, from where I come from, I don't want to see police departments using drones to spy on people. I don't want to see them using them for crowd control. There are police departments right now that are looking at drones to have them armed, with so that they can be used for crowd control. And I think that that's abhorrent that we are going to be using that kind of those technology against our own people, or for that matter against anyone.
Yeah.
And I've been to Pakistan. I know people in Pakistan. I work with peace groups in Pakistan. And our drone program in Pakistan has only caused, a breach between us and the Pakistani people. It's caused more problems as far as radicalizing a population against the United States than it has to create peace between our two countries.
And it's very much, you talk about the international human rights, that very clear here, the obligation of a soldier or when you're at war is to take prisoners first. And this is a political assassination tool. What they're using drones for in Pakistan and these other countries is to target people that are radicals in a very broad sense. They're not, most of them, not involved in direct terrorism.
And they
they're using it to kill people, and then there's citizens.
Well, then they talk about they're such precise targeting, weapons, and yet, and I've brought this up at some of my other talks, is that, if you think about it here in the United States, that say Osama bin Laden, or say there's somebody in at the Dayton Mall, that our law enforcement has got to get. And they decide, well, the only way that we can get this person is that we're going to take him out with a drone. We fly a Predator drone out from Wright Pat, and we take him out with a Hellfire missile. But it just so happens we end up taking out another 150 people along with it. Now, would we tolerate that type of behavior by our law enforcement here in the United States?
We might.
Well,
I think,
Some people might.
No,
but
I actually think, I think if we have, I think we're being conditioned to tolerate it,
Right.
and that we already
Gradually.
have the killing of black men, of unarmed black men, is epidemic.
oh, I know.
And it's tolerated by American people. I mean, not only is it tolerated, when you try to put people on trial for it, they let them off. So, I don't know whether I believe that American people would go up and up if they truly believed that this was the only way to make them safe.
Well,
because that's what we're conditioned.
Sadly, if you're right, then I'm living in the wrong country, because to me that is right there that you're denying human rights to everybody in that mall.
Absolutely.
Just like you're denying the right to anyone that is not given due process.
And I want to come back to that example, because one of the drone strikes that happened in Yemen killed 130 people in a village. And these missiles,
That's why I brought that up.
They do, in some instances, kill a lot of people. And they may get the honcho that they were looking for, but was he a Black Panther that was a leader of their people, that was fighting for their people? Was it a union organizer that was trying to? And they will twist this eventually, and they really over exaggerate the jobs that are going to be created by this. But they will twist it where someday it will get so chaotic. We're already an extremely chaotic and very dangerous situation in this country with the amount of violence that is out there. It's incredible.
By law enforcement, and part of what's happening, and this goes back to the school to pimps and pipeline and the corporations as person issue. What has happened is that we have militarized our police force, and so that police are no longer responsible for being a member of the community that they protect, but somehow their own safety becomes the biggest issue, and they act that way so that they respond with biases,
With over too much force.
Too much force. They respond to, and it's getting worse.
We got a truck driver that was killed here at the truck stop,
and
we don't know why, and the guy was unarmed, and I don't know if they've come up with a decision on that, but
we're militarizing more than, the thing is, people aren't even stopping to think, why does Sinclair have a police department? Why does the University of Dayton have a police department? Why does Miami Valley Hospital have a police department? Why does the schools, schools will tell you,
this
why
comes
do we
to
have
the
all
whole
these
illness
police?
of our society, is that our answer to our safety is to add more police, to add more prisons, to add more security to our society, instead of correcting the problems that cause causes the reasons for the insecurity. But really the safest society is the society that needs no police at all. And see that is, we see ourselves as the hammer, and the rest of the world as the nail.
Yeah.
We are a reactive society. We feel that we have to react to everything instead of being proactive and creating our solutions. We react to a violent world by being violent instead of creating peace.
Yeah.
And this is what we need to do in our schools, in our neighborhoods, in our own country, and in the world. We need to do it in our families, is create peace, not react to violence. And that is the biggest thing that we have to change in ourselves and in our society.
sure. Well, it's real easy. The average person out there gets a knee-jerk reaction to, and we understand that.
We're taught that.
That there's the sense of survival, and that they see all this happening, and you think, well, that person needs to be punished and needs to be, they're very easy to set back and say we need to kill that person is the next step in that decision-making process. But that has become they use violence to manipulate us into saying, well, can we solve this before it gets to that point? And instead of solving these problems, whether it's here or around the world, they're into
our
making
budget
it worse.
shows that.
Now we got another guest in the audience. I want to get to Abdul Shank here he's with we sat together on the Education and Advocate Committee of the Community Action Partnership together.
Yes, we did.
And who and I might point out right quick is co-sponsoring the panel tonight. They endorsed it and are part of a group that we work very closely with. So, Abdul, thank you for coming.
Yes. I worked on the Community Action Program for many years, and also have worked with LEAD, and we helped to bring about the buses in Beaver Creek, where we know we had the discrimination out there. I've also worked with in WACP. I went with the march we had back in August, and that was a real thrilling experience. And I would like to just add that the people that's on the panel, I'm familiar with each one of, not you personally, but the things that you represent. I've been into the different prisons and talked in the prisons, and talk to inmates about their responsibilities of what they need to do with this time that they have and to make something better themselves. And I worked with, I'm a member, past member of the armed workers for 38 years. And I was one of the first African Americans that went to AK Steel to be a foreman down there. That was back in the 70s. So it's a lot of things that we need to do. And also I would like to say that we need to take on the responsibility of ourselves of what we need to do, because we see so many things that's happening. We have the communities that's, really don't have good communities anymore because everything is taken out of the communities. The stores, the barber shops, the theaters, the skating rings, all those things have been taken out. And so we're living in a society now that people are confused. There's so much information out here that we don't know what to grab hold to. It's good information, it's bad information. But we need to start thinking that there's an answer to all our problems. There's a solution. And we start thinking better and start acting better, eating better, and training our minds, we can see that we can have a better society. We can have peace. Because if we don't have peace, we can see what's going to happen is the world, we're going to destroy ourselves, and we don't want that to happen. So we need to start, everyone that we can help, our children, our grandchildren, our friends, our neighbors, let's start getting together and working with them and telling them their responsibilities they need to take on themselves. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a dual thing here. You have to look at the problem and decide that it affects everybody and that we all have a responsibility, like you're saying, to deal with it. And unfortunately, we have a lot of people out there that are spectators. They're watching all this, and we appreciate it if you're watching our show right at any time here, but you have to do more than that. You have to get involved and get active, because the time is ticking here on all this stuff. The unions and the workers have been pushed to the background. The whole electoral process is a huge mess. That the elections are bought and sold by the persons of the corporate persons. And it takes so much money to run. They're the only ones that can run effectively. And so we're in this boat together, and what the Full Employment Council is trying to do, and what we want to do is highlight about this International Human Rights Day, is 65 years ago they could see that they needed a foundation to change things. And here we are 2 generations basically later, and it's all in danger. Go ahead.
Well, I wanted to, the problem is for us in the United States is that we have never fully embraced enforcing human rights. And it's not just something of the last 20 years. We have just, if you look at our human rights, take the racial discrimination, the treaty to eliminate racial discrimination. I think most people would be surprised to know that the United States didn't even really sign on to that until 2001, I believe, right before the World Conference Against Racism. So we never, the right of the child. And then when we do sign on to a human rights treaty, we always put kind of covenants that says we don't have to give our citizens any more rights than they already have. So it's almost a show signing. So I think we've got to stop thinking that we're the leaders in human rights and look at ourselves for real in terms of where we really are. And I think the personhood, corporate personhood, is a huge issue.
Yeah, it's at the heart of all this stuff where it's warped. We have very little bit of time, but I want to give people a chance. I wanted to mention one more thing. I was fortunate enough to be able to go to Memphis, Tennessee here and rally in support of the Kellogg workers. I have a flyer from them, but down in Tennessee, the unionized plant down there, Tony the Tagger, is that the guy at Kellogg's? Their logo. They're locked out, and they're using scabs from Ohio to break the union in Tennessee. And they'll hold this up here. You can take a look, but when you go to the supermarket, tell them that you want good cereal made by unionized workers, not scabs that are like taking the money and ruining families anywhere. In Memphis, Tennessee, Martin Luther King went down there and stood with the workers and made several trips down there before they took him out because he was getting too radical. And someday someone like that, they might decide to use a drone on him. But we have to stand up with the unions for peace and for change. I'm going to give everybody a chance. Chuck, you want to say something? Really got like about 30 seconds.
Just real quickly on the Kellogg situation, I want to explain to the folks that these workers did not ask for a raise. This has nothing to do with anything like that. What's happening is Kellogg's wants to do away with all their full-time work and use casual and part-time workers. Am I correct?
Yeah.
So this is not the union overreaching or anything like that. It's Kellogg overreaching. So,
Yeah.
But that's about all I got.
Yeah, well, we have to stand with folks all around the country. Mary Sue?
I would really like people to go to movetoamend.org and just sign the petition that says that we want to end corporate personhood and get money out of politics. And then I also think that we all need to really work together because there are so many different organizations out there, whether we're fighting about, healthcare, schools, prisons, unions, drones, all of the issues are important, and we need to keep aware of all the issues and continue to support each other in this struggle.
That's right, and unity is the key to change things.
Absolutely.
I just real quick, I don't know if I answered completely your question about the drone issue here in the Miami Valley. And if our schools and everyone that are getting involved in the Chamber of Commerce on the drones, if it is all for peace technology and it creates jobs, that's great. It's just that it isn't all for peace technology. We're getting a lot of companies here in the Miami Valley that are using weaponized drones, and we need to watch out for that.
All right, well, thanks everybody for turning out. Thanks for everybody in the audience for being here tonight. What we say with the Full Employment Council, we're in a fight for jobs and people's rights, and it's up to everybody to get involved because this is your life, and it makes a big difference if you can make a change. And to make that change, you have to get involved. And without that, the crumbling of our society that we see will go on. And I think people are ready. I've talked to a lot of people on the street, and they're fed up to enough that they're ready to take a stand. So get in touch with the groups here, get in touch with our group, and become an active citizen.